Welcome into another edition of Conversations with Paul Brown. Today we are at Grace Episcopal Church, one of the oldest churches in Anderson, and they just had recently a pretty cool event to take place. Our guest, Barbara Scott, is the church historian. Jack Hardaway is the church's rector, and together they're going to share with us the history of the church and what just happened. Barbara, first, give our listeners a little history on how you ended up here.
I wound up in Columbia working for educational television. And while I was there, a gentleman from Anderson came down and he said, "You know, I come to Anderson once in a while. If you'll have dinner with me, I'd like to call you and we'll do that." I did, he did. As a matter of fact, he came 2 days later. And
To Columbia
from Anderson to take me to dinner. It was a lovely evening, and that was the beginning of the love story. And
the year was what?
This was 1973.
Wow.
Yeah. 1974, we were married right here at Grace Church. And when I saw what this church was about, what it was like, I came here as his date one Sunday. And when I left that day, I thought, oh man, so this is what it's supposed to be like. And the rest is history. We were married here. Our daughter was baptized and confirmed here. And I've never looked back. It's a wonderful, wonderful place to be.
And Jack, how did you get here?
I have no idea.
Because you grew up.
I grew up in Greenville,
Right.
and was ordained a priest 21 years ago, and I served a couple other churches before they called me here. I've been here just over 12 years.
Growing up in Greenville, what led you to your occupation?
To the priesthood?
Yes.
Oh, gosh. I had a deep conversion experience when I was in high school, and I grew up in the Episcopal Church. And I just had this love of Scripture and of the sacraments that sort of led me into the priesthood. And I've always been interested in how the life of faith is involved in serving the community and serving the poor, and also glorifying God and making beauty. And that's sort of been a great fit for me.
Yeah.
I think God has given me this appreciation and these gifts that work with those kind of things.
In high school, when it came time to choose a college, was that difficult for you, knowing that you wanted to enter the priesthood?
Okay, I didn't know that in high school, but I think I decided in college. I went to Furman University,
Okay.
so
Good Baptist school.
Yeah. They left the convention the year after I graduated, so.
Did you have anything to do with that?
That must have been my fault.
So after that, had you begun a job when you got
Yeah,
out?
I worked for a couple of years in D.C. doing inner city ministry with the homeless and with sort of high school equivalency exam tutoring.
Okay.
And lasted a couple of years, and then went to seminary.
Where?
Virginia Theological Seminary in Alexandria.
And along the way, you met a gal.
Yes.
Tell us that story.
Her name is Susan Loudit. She's from Valdosta, and she was involved in some similar internships that I was involved in. And she started seminary 2 years ahead of me. And so while she was in seminary, I was living in D.C. and doing this, serious inner city ministry. And then I would escape over to Alexandria to the Holy Hill to Virginia Seminary and court her, and we got married a couple of years later, and then we came back to South Carolina.
How did you end up at Grace? How does the Episcopal Church call a priest?
The search committee sends these little secret teams of people to come visit you.
Okay.
All right, so they come visit your old church,
Okay.
and they're in disguise.
Yes.
I'm just your average visitor, but I'm here to steal your priest in reality.
And in fact, Grace did steal a priest.
Yes.
Jack, what about the community of Anderson?
Oh, it's a blast. And the Grace Church, the other downtown churches have chosen to stay.
Yeah.
And they've done amazing things, setting up a whole series of nonprofit ministries, and Grace has been right in the middle of all of that. And so I'm in this position where I get invited to all these parties that raise money for all these amazing things that really make differences in the world.
Your wife is also a priest, but she
Yes.
goes to Hartwell, and that's her congregation over there.
But she also does part-time youth ministry at a church in Simpsonville as well. So she's got
Wow.
two half-time positions.
Plus taking care of you,
Yeah,
which is
yeah.
a full-time job.
Yeah. More and more so.
Barbara, you're the historian. You want to tell us about the early days of this church?
The church was started in 1851 by a group of women, and with the support of their husbands, they got together, they met in people's homes, and they became Grace Episcopal Church. It was a little wooden building, and it housed the congregation, the small congregation. It caught fire at least 3 times, and the congregation would do what they had to do to rebuild. And the last time,
Let's build a brick one this time.
last time they decided, why don't we raise money for bricks? Yeah. And the wooden building, of course, was heated with a coal-burning stove sitting in the middle of the floor to get as many people possible warm, and it kept burning. Anyway, long story short, the building that we are in now was finished in 1904. The first service held in the brick church was Easter Day, 1904. And the only part of the original building that was salvaged was the stained glass windows in the apse of the church. And those windows were a gift from the Sisters Morris. The Morris sisters owned property that I think we're sitting on now. This was the Morris house where we are. And they donated the windows. We do know that they were formed in Europe.
How did they get here?
They came by ship from Europe, arriving at a port in New York, taken to the train station. We have a note from the Sisters Morris that tells the vestry that the windows have arrived in New York, and I will insure them until they arrive at the train station in Anderson. After that, they're yours. So we got them here. The vestry, consisting of 12 gentlemen, prominent gentlemen in Anderson, had a vestry meeting and talked about receiving the windows and how to get them installed in the old wooden church. The end of that discussion ended with each of the gentlemen being assessed 50 cents apiece to pay for the installation of the windows in that old wooden building.
But it's kind of fascinating, those windows on a boat to New York, on a train to Anderson, and I guess what then? A horse-drawn buggy probably from the depot to the church?
I wouldn't be at all surprised. Yeah, probably a sizable wagon. It would have had to have been as big as a hay wagon probably to get them here.
And then when were they moved? In '04, when this building was built, that they were put in the front of the church?
They were salvaged from the old building that burned. There's a fascinating inscription on the windows talking about the gift from the Morris family. They were given to the glory of God and in loving memory of his wife, Martha Mott Primrose, and their daughters. But anyway, they used to sit. The bottoms of the windows were level and they were close together. In this new building, it's a larger space, and the gospel windows are about that much higher than the big center shepherd window. And if you look at the left window, the inscription at the bottom, it says, "To the glory of God, his wife, and daughter." I love showing that window to people because I tell them that's the only one like it in all of Christendom. But when the windows were closer together in the old building,
we have a very interesting Trinitarian theology.
Yes, we did. Our guests this morning, Reverend Jack Hardaway and Barbara Scott, are at Grace Episcopal Church. When we come back, we're going to continue our conversation.
This is the first bell in this tower. The original church structure, a clapboard building, must have had a small bell in it, but most of those bells were melted down for the Civil War. This current bell tower was finished in 1904, and it's never had a bell in it. So we don't like to rush into that kind of thing. So we just finally got around to it, 112 years later. 50 years ago, the priest here, Ed Clifford, started the project of looking into designing this bell, and they worked on it for about 12 years, and they never could get the funding together. Earl Rice was on the project, and he passed away recently and left us a nice gift, and we used it to make the bell project complete. And here it is. We have Ed Clifford's name on the bell and Earl Rice's name on the bell. It's got 2 ropes. One does a full swing, and that makes it really, that's the loud, continuous ring. And then it has a hammer here, just one bell, one ring at a time. Like that. So this is for a calling to worship. That's traditionally church bells are for call to worship, and then tolling out for the dead on days, funerals, and on All Saints Sunday and All Saints Day. So the bell, who does the bell toll for? It tolls for thee.
So the church is pretty excited.
Oh yeah. Oh, so the original church building, which was fire damaged, it was a small clapboard building and a small clapboard tower, and probably in a small bronze bell. Most of those bells during the Civil War in the community were melted down for the cause and used for ammunition. And they were replaced by steel bells. But Grace never replaced it, and so when we built the current building, it was finished in 1904, we never added a bell to it.
But there was a bell tower.
Right. And so
somebody at least had the forethought to put you up a tower.
Technically, it's a bell-less tower.
Okay.
Yeah, so for 112 years, we had a bell-less tower. And 50 years ago, Reverend Ed Clifford told the vestry, said, let's get a bell. And so they spent about 12 years working on it and decided they could never get enough money and to pull it off.
Because back then we were looking at what? How much is it going to cost to put you up a bell 50 years ago?
I think the whole project was between $3,000 and $5,000.
Toward the end of that 10 years, yes, but when they started, it was somewhere in the neighborhood of $1,000, $1,500. But then that was hard money to raise during that time.
Okay.
And
so we put it on the back burner.
No, it was just taken off the stove completely.
Okay.
Yeah, and then Earl Rice, who worked on the Bell project,
who was a local Anderson attorney, well known.
He passed away a year and a half ago.
Probably.
I don't remember exactly.
And he left the church a very nice gift, and we thought it would be appropriate to finish the project that he was involved in 50 years ago, and finish a project that has been sort of off the stove for 112 years.
Not only put it on the stove top, but on the front burner.
Yeah, and it's been fascinating. There are no electrical parts to it. It's all manual. There's nothing that can go wrong. It's very low maintenance. If you pull the rope too hard, you can swing the bell around and the rope will come unwound. But besides that, it's kind of low maintenance. How
difficult was it to get the bell? And did the fact that they at least tried to get a bell 50 years ago come into play?
Oh, so we contacted, the original company was in Greenwood, and it was one of the major foundries in the country. And that company has changed hands a couple of times since the original Bell project started. But our files were still on hand. And so the Burden Company in Cincinnati, Ohio had them, and so I asked them, was our original quote still good?
And they kind of laughed.
Yeah, I was serious. and then they gave me a new quote, and then I got kind of quiet. And
you're waiting for the Lord to move.
But we needed some. We had enough money in the original bequest for the bell and most of the equipment. The installation took some extra money, so we found that. And so on the bell itself, we just simply put God's glory and on the words on the bell, and then the Reverend Ed Clifford and Earl McGee Rice on the bell.
And the date.
And the 2016 year. Yeah.
The bell weighs how much?
The bell itself is about 400 or 500 pounds.
And
all the equipment is about 1,000 pounds.
Yeah. Okay.
And then we needed something to hang the equipment from in a 112-year-old tower. And really, in the past 112 years, people have only gone up there maybe a dozen times. And so it took some work to get it sound and secure again.
The bell has two functions.
Yes.
This just ain't your ordinary run-of-the-mill brass bell. This got an extra accessory.
Bronze bell.
Bronze, I'm sorry. Yeah. Tell me.
So it's two ropes. One does a full swing. The bell makes the whole bell go back and forth, and the clanger. What do you call it? The clapper. The clapper just goes crazy, and it makes a lot of noise. And then there's the striker, which you pull on a second rope, and it just simply swings a hammer and hits the bell once.
And you have the two parts of the bell perform two functions for your church.
Yeah, so
explain that.
So traditionally, church bells are used for calling to worship, and then they're also used for tolling out that's when somebody passes away, and used during the procession in and out of the church. It's called a funeral toll, and it's very, very slow. You ring the bell once about every maybe 10 seconds. And then you have sort of the festive times, like at the end of service or Pentecost or Easter, and just ring the bells. Everybody takes turns ringing it and ringing it and ringing it. I'm sure we're going to get some calls from the neighbors.
Our guest is Barbara Scott and Father Jack Hardaway. When we come back, we're going to conclude our conversation. Welcome back to our closing couple minutes with Grace Episcopal Church. When the work was done and the bell rang for the first time at Grace Episcopal, what was the reaction of the congregation, maybe the neighbors, maybe the local police?
We haven't heard anything from the police or the neighbors yet. But we have two services on Sunday morning, 8 a.m. and 10:30 a.m. In the early service, this Sunday, they finished it Saturday night, and Sunday morning was All Saints Sunday, that's when we read the names of everybody who's passed away over the previous year. And so when we read the names, we rang the bell one time for each person, and it was very, we rang out the dead. And then at the 10:30 service, we have a lot more younger families and children. At the end of the service, everybody sort of took turns pulling on the full swing. What do you call it?
The clapper.
The clapper. So that it's going ding a ding, ding a ding, ding. Everybody's taking turns. Ding a ding, ding a ding.
So it's a great day of rejoicing at Grace Episcopal.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, we want to thank Barbara and Jack for sharing their story from Grace Episcopal with us this morning, and we want to thank all of you for tuning in and invite you to be back with us next week, same time, for another edition of Conversations with Paul and Brown. Until then, take care, everybody.